Voldemort is dead. The war is over. Everyone cheered, went home, and presumably slept for a week. But the wizarding world didn't stop existing just because the bald, noseless man finally stayed down. What happened next? Rowling filled in the gaps through interviews, Pottermore entries, and lore that never made it into the books. Let's find out. Harry Potter. Harry Potter survived a killing curse twice, defeated the most feared dark wizard of all time, and briefly died at 17. So, what did he do next? Took a well-earned rest? Traveled the world? Absolutely not. He went straight to work. Classic Harry. Fun fact, Harry lost his ability to speak Parseltongue after Voldemort's soul fragment was destroyed. 19 years later, snakes are just snakes again. The scar faded and the vision stopped. Harry finally had his head to himself. He skipped his 7th year entirely and joined the Auror office immediately, because apparently hunting Horcruxes across the country counts as enough work experience. His career moved fast. By age 26, Harry was already head of the Auror office, the youngest person to ever hold that position in ministry history, an institution historically run by wizards who spent decades climbing the ranks. Harry did it before his brain was fully developed. He also landed a chocolate frog card, putting him alongside Dumbledore and Merlin himself. Not bad for someone who grew up sleeping in a cupboard. Occasionally he returned to Hogwarts to guest lecture in defense against the dark arts, which given his track record he was slightly overqualified for. On the personal side, he married Ginny Weasley and had 3 kids. James Sirius, Albus Severus, and Lily Luna, every name a tribute. So yeah, Harry finally had what Voldemort spent decades trying to destroy, a family. Ron Weasley. Ron Weasley skipped his last year at Hogwarts too. After the battle, he jumped straight into the Auror department with Harry, helping catch the Death Eaters who thought they could just quietly disappear after Voldemort lost. They could not. But after about 2 years of that, Ron did something that surprised everyone. He quit. He handed his badge in, walked out of the ministry, and went to work at a joke shop. And honestly, good for him. The joke shop was Weasley's Wizard Wheezy's, Fred and George's business. Fred was gone, and George was trying to keep it running by himself. He married Hermione, which, let's be honest, took way too long, and they had 2 kids, Rose and Hugo. Rowling also dropped one of the best details in all of the post-series material. Ron learned to drive in the Muggle world, and he only passed his test by casting the Confundus charm on the examiner. Hermione definitely found out. He was also named godfather to Harry and Ginny's eldest son, James Sirius, which basically made the best friend thing official on paper. Hermione Granger. Hermione did the sensible thing, obviously. While Harry and Ron skipped straight to careers, Hermione went back to Australia first, restored her parents' memories because she had casually erased their entire identities to keep them safe, no big deal, reunited her family, returned to Hogwarts, finished her 7th year, sat her NEWTs, and then single-handedly started dismantling centuries of discrimination at the Ministry of Magic. Busy year, but she can handle it. She fought for house elf rights, demolished pure-blood favoritism laws, climbed through magical law enforcement, and eventually became Minister for Magic. She also translated the Tales of Beetle of the Bard from ancient runes in her spare time, because Hermione Granger doesn't know what spare time means. Never has, never will. But now you know she married Ron and had 2 children. But what you might not know is that she later received her own chocolate frog card alongside Harry and Ron. The trio officially completed the set. After surviving 7 years at the safest school in Britain, they finally received official recognition for almost dying annually. Ginny Weasley. Ginny didn't just become Harry Potter's wife and call it a day. She became a professional Quidditch player for the Holyhead Harpies, one of Britain's most famous all-witch teams. Played until retiring to raise 3 kids with Harry, then pivoted to journalism as a Quidditch correspondent for the Daily Prophet. She covered the 2014 Quidditch World Cup. The woman retired from professional sport and launched a second career. Ginny's post-war story is a reminder that she was never just Harry's girlfriend. She had her own ambitions, her own career, and her own legacy. The Potter household was a team effort. She just happened to also be on a different team, professionally speaking. Neville Longbottom. Neville Longbottom, the boy who was terrified of his own professor. The boy everyone underestimated for 6 straight years. The boy briefly joined the Auror office after the war, then became Harry's herbology professor, then head of Gryffindor House, the greatest character arc in the entire series, and it kept going after the books ended. He sometimes showed students his enchanted Dumbledore's army coin during class, a casual reminder that he helped bring down a Dark Lord. No big deal, just teaching plants now. He married Hannah Abbott, fellow DA member, who ran the Leaky Cauldron while Neville taught at Hogwarts. He was also named godfather to Harry's son Albus Severus. The Sorting Hat always knew that would happen. Luna Lovegood. Luna became a magizoologist, traveled the world searching for magical creatures. And yes, she spent considerable time trying to find the crumple-horned Snorkack. She never found it. She did, however, discover and classify entirely new magical species that expanded wizarding knowledge considerably. So the joke is very much on everyone who laughed at her in school corridors. She married Rolf Scamander, grandson of Newt Scamander, the man who literally wrote the book on magical creatures. A match so cosmically inevitable it had to be fate. They had twin sons named Lorcan and Lysander, raised in a household where being weird was not just accepted but actively encouraged. Luna remained completely unapologetically herself her entire life. Draco Malfoy. Draco emerged from the war with his family name in ruins and his ideology in pieces, which honestly was probably necessary. He made peace with Harry after the Battle of Hogwarts. Not friendship exactly, more like cautious mutual respect from two people who had seen too much to keep pretending. He married Astoria Greengrass, who openly rejected pureblood supremacy. At Malfoy Manor, that took courage. Lucius was not pleased. Narcissa had opinions. Nobody asked them. Together they had one son named Scorpius, and Draco raised him with values of kindness and respect from Muggleborns, a direct rebuke to everything the Malfoy name once stood for. Then, Astoria died young from a hereditary blood curse, leaving Draco to raise Scorpius alone. He kept the manor, kept the fortune, and quietly buried the ideology. His post-war life wasn't dramatic redemption, it was slower and messier than that. But it was real. Narcissa Malfoy. Narcissa avoided Azkaban, and honestly, one lie to Voldemort's face in the Forbidden Forest probably saved her entire family from something far worse. She knew what she was doing. Post-war, she accepted Draco's marriage to Astoria, a pure-blood witch, which initially satisfied her. But that satisfaction evaporated when Astoria made clear she wanted nothing to do with blood supremacy. Narcissa was very disappointed, but she adored Scorpius completely, and that grandson became her most important relationship in later years. Where Lucius clung bitterly to a dead ideology, Narcissa redirected her love toward family. A distinction that probably kept her sane. Lucius Malfoy. Lucius avoided Azkaban too by providing the Ministry with information on surviving Death Eaters. Cooperation in exchange for freedom. Very on brand for a man who had spent decades calculating every move for personal survival. It didn't help his reputation. Within pureblood circles, abandoning Voldemort in the final hours of the battle marked him a coward. Within the Ministry, his collaboration record marked him as a former collaborator. Lucius spent his later years as a man whose enormous wealth had completely outrun his importance. Rich, bitter, and largely ignored by everyone including his own family. Fitting doesn't even begin to cover it. George Weasley. George lost an ear during the Seven Potters' escape, then lost Fred in the final battle. 2 permanent absences in less than a year. And yet, he chose to keep building the very business they had created together. Post-war Britain didn't trust the Ministry, and strangely, that worked in his favor. Sales at Weasley's Wizard Wheezy's soared. Shield hats, decoy detonators, defensive prank gear. Suddenly, the jokes were practical survival tools. He married Angelina Johnson and had 2 children, Roxanne and Fred. And one detail many fans miss, he never regrew his ear. Magical reconstruction was possible, but he refused. Percy Weasley. Percy spent years choosing the Ministry over his family, watched that Ministry collapse under Voldemort, showed up to the Battle of Hogwarts, and finally got it right. Better late than never. After the war, he rose to head of the Department of Magical Transportation under Kingsley Shacklebolt. He married a witch named Audrey and had 2 daughters named Molly and Lucy. Percy rebuilt his family relationships quietly and without fanfare. No grand speeches, just showing up, which for Percy Weasley was actually the harder thing to do. Bill Weasley. Bill Weasley survived a werewolf attack, married a part Vila French witch over his own mother's initial reservations, fought in a war, and came out the other side looking completely fine. The man is simply built differently from the rest of us, and he knows it. He and Fleur settled at Shell Cottage and raised 3 children named Victoire, Dominique, and Louis. Bill kept curse-breaking for Gringotts, traveling occasionally but always coming home to a household that somehow blended Weasley chaos with French precision, and produced something that probably smelled incredible. Fleur de la Cour. Fleur was decorated by the French Ministry of Magic for her wartime bravery, accepted it graciously, and then chose family life anyway because she had already decided what mattered, and a medal wasn't changing anything. She raised 3 children with Bill at Shell Cottage, blending French and English wizarding traditions in a household that probably had the best food within 50 miles, and the most intense arguments about how to cook it properly. Molly Weasley. Molly Weasley survived the war the way she survived everything else, fiercely, loudly, and with zero tolerance for dark wizards threatening her children. After personally defeating Bellatrix Lestrange, which still feels under-discussed, she returned to what she always did best, holding the family together. The Burrow remained the unofficial headquarters of post-war recovery. Holidays got louder, the table got longer. Grandchildren arrived in waves. Molly made sure every single one of them knew exactly how loved they were. Arthur Weasley. Arthur returned to the misuse of Muggle artifacts office after the war, happily tinkering with cello tape and plug sockets in a ministry that finally respected him properly. Then Kingsley promoted him to head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The man who once had a flying Ford Anglia hidden in his shed ended up running one of the most powerful departments in Wizarding Britain. Completely deserved and still somehow the funniest career trajectory in the entire ministry. He became grandfather to 12 Weasley grandchildren, all of whom he adored completely, and absolutely none of whom he could keep track of at Christmas. Minerva McGonagall. McGonagall was awarded the Order of Merlin First Class, got a chocolate frog card, became headmistress of Hogwarts, and rebuilt the entire school from rubble upward. She also finally lifted the curse on the Defense Against the Dark Arts position, which had been quietly destroying that job for decades, hired capable professors, allowed war students to return and finish their education, and oversaw annual Battle of Hogwarts commemorations. All of this while remaining the single most terrifying presence at any staff meeting in Wizarding Britain. She became headmistress at an age when most witches were considering retirement and proceeded to run Hogwarts with a combination of iron discipline and quiet compassion that genuinely baffled people who only knew her reputation. The students were terrified of her, but they also absolutely adored her. Kingsley Shacklebolt. Kingsley became Minister for Magic and immediately got to work fixing an institution that had spent decades being catastrophically wrong about almost everything. The first order of business was removing Dementors from Azkaban, an institution that had spent roughly 1,000 years outsourcing its security to 10-foot-tall soul-draining misery creatures finally stopped. Wild idea. It only took the entire wizarding world being conquered by a Dark Lord to get there. He backed Hermione's reforms, rebuilt law enforcement from scratch, and ran the ministry with competence so consistent and fairness so genuine that people kept checking if something was wrong. Nothing was wrong. He was just good at his job. In Wizarding Britain, that was apparently a staggering novelty. When he eventually stepped down, Hermione took over. He left her a ministry that actually functioned, possibly the greatest achievement of his entire career. Rubeus Hagrid. Hagrid stayed at Hogwarts, obviously. The idea of Hagrid anywhere else is genuinely incoherent. He kept his hut, kept his collection of creatures that had absolutely no business being near a school, maintained his remarkable ability to describe a dragon that nearly killed several children as misunderstood, and remained the first face generations of new Hogwarts students saw when they arrived, which means the school kept making its first impression through a 9-foot half-giant carrying a crossbow and offering homemade rock cakes that were a known dental hazard. Andromeda Tonks. Andromeda Tonks lost her husband Ted, her daughter Tonks, and her son-in-law Lupin all in the same war. 3 people, 1 battle. The universe handed her the worst possible outcome, and then left her with a baby boy who could change his hair color at will, and an honorary godfather who was barely an adult himself and still processing his own grief. She raised Teddy anyway, full stop, no hesitation. She poured what was left of herself into that child, made sure he knew exactly who his parents were, and exactly how much they had loved him, and built him a life out of the wreckage of one of the war's greatest losses. Teddy Lupin. Teddy Lupin was orphaned at birth, inherited his mother's Tonks metamorphagus abilities, meaning he could change his hair, face, and general appearance whenever he felt like it, which as a Hogwarts teenager was either the greatest gift imaginable or a genuinely unhinged amount of power to hand to an adolescent. quite possibly both, and grew up surrounded by the Potter and Weasley families because Harry Potter took the words "I'll be his godfather" seriously and showed up consistently for 18 years. Teddy grew up shaped by loss but not crushed by it. Confident, loved, and apparently a fan of public displays of affection at train stations. His parents would have been so unreasonably proud it's genuinely painful to think about. Seamus Finnigan. Seamus Finnigan spent 6 years being the student most likely to accidentally destroy the thing he was trying to fix, set fire to the thing he was trying to light, and blow up the thing he was standing near. Then he turned around and helped defend Hogwarts Castle in the final battle, which involved actual explosions, and was therefore possibly the one situation at Hogwarts where Seamus Finnigan was the most qualified person in the room. He returned for an extra year to finish his studies alongside Dean Thomas and the other DA members who had spent their 7th year doing things significantly more dangerous than exams. His role in the battle earned him genuine respect. He finished his education, moved on, and got on with his life. Seamus Finnigan survived 7 years of Hogwarts, a war, and his own spell work. That last one might have been the closest call. Dolores the Toad Umbridge. Dolores did not slip quietly into obscurity after the war, which is unfortunate for her and deeply satisfying for every single person who ever sat through one of her detentions. Kingsley Shacklebolt's reformed ministry looked at her complete record, the systematic persecution of Muggleborns, the torture disguised as homework, the cruelty dressed in pink cardigans and surrounded by decorative kitten plates that somehow made everything worse, and decided very firmly that I was following ministry policy was not going to work as a defense this time. Groundbreaking legal conclusion. She was arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in Azkaban. Here's the thing though, by the time she arrived, the Dementors were already gone, removed under Kingsley's reforms. No supernatural soul-draining torment waiting for her. Just a cell, silence, and the permanent knowledge that the entire wizarding world knows exactly what she did, and thinks about her accordingly. Now, if you think one war was chaotic, wait until you see all 5 Wizarding Wars in Harry Potter Explained. That's your next lesson at Stickman Hogwarts. Click now before Dolores smiles at you and hands you a cup of pink tea you didn't ask for.